Right. What's up, everybody? It's Real Talk Tuesday. We're back again, and I have my crew with me today. First, I want to introduce Sister Brittany Stevenson, Sister Brianna Branch, Sister Miosha Crimpin,
Hey, y'all.
and the Reverend Kenneth Watson. Now, myself, Reverend Brandon Gilson, and we're back again. Tonight we're excited. We're so excited because we have a special guest with us, Dr. David Defoe. Let's give him a hand clap. Yeah, we're excited to have him with us tonight as we talk about a very serious topic. I just want to give a little background about Dr. David Defoe. Dr. David Defoe is a licensed clinical professional counselor. He's also a national certified counselor, and a certified grief recovery counselor, which is so befitting to have him tonight as we talk about a topic that is very, very serious in mental health today, which is grief. So we just want to go ahead and get right into it. Just talk with Dr. David for a little bit. And the first question we have for you, Dr. David, is what is grief? When we talk about grief, what is grief?
Well, Reverend Gail, man, good to see you. Good to be with all of you all on this Real Talk Tuesday. Grief is the normal and natural reaction or response to loss. When we talk about grief, we're not just talking about grief to death. Of course, commonly, grief is for most people when I lose someone that's close to me. But grief extends beyond just death. Grief can extend to those things that we don't view as losses, changing of jobs, moving from one house to another. There are individuals who experienced grief during COVID, that loss of normalcy, not being able to go. Well, some of us were excited we couldn't go to work, but or work from home. But there are other people that are, that enjoyed being out of the house. Just think about those people that didn't like who they lived with and they were stuck with them. That is incredible amounts of grief. So any normal change in any pattern of behavior, any significant change in any normal pattern of behavior creates grief. And we go through periods of bereavement when we have large or big life changes that then, force us to utilize our coping strategies to deal with whatever changes those are. So it's more than just death. Divorce is another big one that is equated with loss. Some people say getting married. Some people experience grief when they get married. Of course, they should be happy and excited. I see your all's faces, but for many people, when they get married, the period of adjustment in marriage is related to the fact that we have lost our individuality. I'm now grieving the fact that I can't get up and do whatever I want. Of course it's good. There's some good benefit to it, but for some people, that period of adjustment is a grieving period for them. And so there are all types of losses. And so any normal change in any pattern of behavior equates to grief. Now, when we talk about grief as it relates to the loss of a loved one, grief is that shifting in our behavior where we look for someone. This is the Grief Recovery Institute's definition, looking for someone that's always been there. And when you need them again, recognizing that they're no longer there is the description of the grieving moment that we have. And so hopefully that answers your question. I don't want to go too deep with it because then I'm sure you're going to ask me more questions.
It definitely did.
No,
and we are.
But the key is any change in any significant pattern of behavior creates grief.
Wow. No, that was good. That was good. You came out the gate with us, man. That was definitely good. So, because my next question is like, what are the most common types of grief? But I think you've already kind of hit on that a little bit, unless you want to expound on that a little more.
Sure. Well, There's all types of grief. And so we have normative grief, or grief that we'll place into the normal category, things that we can identify as losses. But there are things like anticipatory grief. And so if you've ever had someone that is suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, or someone who has a terminal illness, there's anticipatory grief. There's ambiguous loss or ambiguous grief, grief that we don't think is grief. So many of us, even during the COVID time, we didn't lose someone, or for those of us who did lose someone, it was definitely tragic, because not only did we lose somebody, but we also lost our ability to gather together to grieve in community, which we all Black on here, as Black folk, we like to grieve. We have to grieve and heal in community. And so we lost that opportunity for our corporate conclusionary rituals. And so that is an idea, that is an example of an ambiguous loss. So not only did I lose the person, but I also lost my ability to grieve in community with other people as I lost this person. And so I have then compounded grief, because I wasn't able even to, release or exchange the stories or get the hugs or even get the chicken box dinners. Those are important too, for funerals. Let's just be honest. You gotta have it. Hey. Come on, man. Let's
you ain't having no repast without fried chicken. That's not how the Black people do.
Don't get me hungry.
With the string beans.
But there's also with 3 beans. My boxes come with 3 pieces of lettuce, so you can act like you have vegetables. So there's also complicated. There's also complicated grief or prolonged grief. So they tell you that you should be over your losses in 6 months, and any loss that extends, or any grieving period or bereavement period that extends beyond 6 months, they call it complicated or prolonged grief. There's also disenfranchised grief that people feel like you shouldn't have. And so if you move, say, from the hood to the hill, they think, oh, you should be so excited about being on the hill, but you grieve in the fact that you left some people behind down in the hood. Whatever, disenfranchised grief. And that's a simplistic definition of it, but it's the grief that we think people shouldn't have. And oftentimes it's those grieving moments that oftentimes cause people the most difficulty, like people who grieve pets. People who grieve pets and then sit in grief groups with other people who have maybe lost children, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, whatever. Some people can feel like the grief of their cat or their dog does not rise to the level of someone else. But this is the key. We don't grieve people and we don't grieve things. We grieve relationships. And the strength of those relationships determine the emotional, psychological, spiritual, physiological impact that we have to that loss. And so we grieve relationships. And so the important thing for us to understand is we can even grieve the same person and grieve differently because our relationships are different.
Wow.
So that person who all they had was their cat. They're grieving because now they have nothing left. They're all by themselves. And so it's important to understand, especially in grief work, especially as we try to deal with people or help people through this despair that they go through when they're grieving, is to make sure that we don't compare losses, that we don't disenfranchise anyone in their grief, because grief is experienced also on a very personal level. Just because you went through something don't mean that you know what I'm going through, because like I said, our relationships are unique. So our grieving experiences are unique because we grieve relationships. That was too much. My bad.
Oh, no, that was good. That was good. That was thorough. That was a good, thorough answer.
I'm sorry. I'm a preacher on the side. So, he didn't say that. I'm a pastor on the side. So I talk a lot and I talk with my hands. And, I'm a therapist. On the side, though? On the side, that's right.
No, I think that was a really good answer because, some people, I remember, and I feel bad about this. I remember when I was in high school, and Brandon don't remember this because we went to school together, when one of our teachers lost a cat. And everybody was like, why is she like, she took 2 days off from school, like over this cat. And everybody was like, that's overdoing it. But she doesn't have children. Those are her babies. So when the cat died, that was that. So it makes sense. I too felt was like, sis, I understand your cat died, but school tomorrow. But hopefully she doesn't see this. She'll know her.
Yeah, man, that was powerful. Yeah, that was powerful, and I never knew that much about grief. Another question is about as far as with the group is what if you want to share, if you would like to share, maybe there's a experience of grief that you experienced, and would you like to share that tonight? If there's any, and I can start. My father died when I was 15 years old, and it'll be this November. It'll be 22 years. Mm-hmm. And I still have my moments, and that's why he said about relationship. I still have my moments even to this day, and it's been 22 years. Whether sometimes it just all depends on what kind of mood I'm in. It could be a song come on the radio, and it might remind me of him, or I go through something in my life, and I just wonder what my dad would say to me, in that moment, and it's just, I feel like I feel like you never get over that significant loss. You can grieve for, long period of time, that's my personal experience. Yeah. Anyone else like to share?
Just before you all share, so Brandon brought up something that's very important that I think we also have to understand about grief, is that there's a lot of misconceptions and lies that people tell us about our grief, like give it time. And one of the things, and of course, we've heard all of these, don't cry, be strong, they're in a better place, whatever, all that. But one of the things they tell us is that it just takes time to grieve our losses. Well, Brandon just said it's been 22 years. So how much time is too long? And I told you, if you grieve more than 6 months, they tell you you have a prolonged grief disorder, right? Okay, so it's not time that does anything, because the truth of the matter is, Brandon, that grief lasts as long as love lasts. And if I can't throw away the love, I'm going to always have the grief. There's always going to be something that triggers a memory. And so we have to free ourselves to be able to believe and the right things about grief. It ain't time. It ain't I got to check a list. It ain't the 2 days they give me off from work. It's going to take more than that. It's not the time necessarily, but what we do with the time. So I'll just stop there and let you all give your reflection.
That was powerful.
Yeah, that was. I'm trying not to be upset, but it's a lot. So my father died when I was 20. Oh, I'm sorry, Reverend Watson. My father died when I was 20, and the relationship was never there with him. So I grieved a different type of grief than what Brandon went through. I grieved the idea of a lost relationship, because I didn't have a relationship with him as a child. And then growing up, I always thought that maybe, once I'm an adult, maybe I'll be able to reconcile. And then that never came. So that, sometimes I still think about that. And that's been, what is this? That's been 15 years? My dad's been dead 15 years. 2007? Yeah, 15 years. And that's still something that I deal with, like the loss of the possibility of a relationship, a reconnection and all of that. So that's my experience with grief. Yeah. Reverend Watson, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, I have a question. Don't necessarily have an experience, but I have a question. So would you say that the goal when dealing with grief is not to get over it, but to cope with it?
Reverend Watson, that's a very astute question. See, let me approach it this way. For many of us, if we're to look at the losses that we've experienced over our lives, we'll discover that we don't deal well with grief, right? We don't deal with pain well, because the first thing we do when we're in pain is we try to figure out the shortest way to turn it off. But what if I were to tell you that the reason that the psalmist David says, yea, though you walk through the valley, means that there's some period of time that you have to spend with the pain, with the grief, that the only way to get through the pain is actually to experience it. To not try to turn it off, but to enter it so that will and allow the pain to instruct you. You see, so for many of us, we don't deal well with the closure necessary to close up the open wounds that exist due to death, divorce, abuse, abandonment, moving, losing friendships, whatever it is, the loss of unmet expectations, right? And it forces us, Reverend Watsons, to live in a dichotomous society, a world in which we publicly have to have it all together, but privately we're searching and yearning and longing for some relief from our pain. And so when you say whether or not is it that we don't get over it, but we do move through it. And the idea is not for it to completely be over. The idea is for us to generate some coping strategies to help us manage the impact of the loss. Well, how is it that we resolve our unexpressed communications with the person that we lost? Because for many people, it's what we didn't say. For many people, it's what we have left over. We didn't apologize. We didn't forgive. We didn't tell people that something that they did to us caused a magnanimous impact on us. And so we've carried those things. And so we're not only carrying the loss of people, but we're carrying the guilt, and some of us even the shame of the relationship the type of relationship that we had with these people, right? Okay, so we have to figure out a way to cope with all of that. And so we develop coping strategies to deal with that. And I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but we view it in 4 spheres. How do we underpin ourselves physically, socially, emotionally, psychologically? How do we get those unresolved communications out? Because our physical relationship with people end when they die, but our spiritual, our emotional connection lives on. So even though they're not physically here anymore, their presence, not being too metaphysical, but their presence is still around us in that they exist in our emotions. They exist in our psychological triggers. They exist in places and things that we see, we smell, we hear. We get those things back up. And so we have to figure out a way to cope so that every time we're triggered by their memory, we're not triggered still by the pain, because we've dealt with the pain instead of pushed it aside. That was another long answer,
but it was a good answer.
Yeah, thank you for lying. I'm not lying. I won't call you a lie, but thank you for encouraging. Thank you for your encouragement. That was.
If it wasn't a good answer, I would have said something.
She's the one that would have said.
You don't even know me. You wouldn't have told me that.
She would have.
She would have. Oh, okay. Okay. Go on then. Go on.
We straight shooters over here.
You dropping some heavy stuff on tonight, man.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
I mean, it's a heavy topic, but Lord have mercy.
It is.
I keep myself together.
Anyone else like to share?
That's the other thing. Cry. Listen. What is the literal expression of pain and sadness? Tears.
Yes.
It's the tears that heal the heart. It's being able to admit, I don't got this. See, the reason we don't like to cry and the reason we don't want people to cry when they're grieving is because their tears then trigger the pain that we have hidden or we have put aside. So I want you to turn off your pain and your tears as soon as possible so that you don't trigger mine. That's why we go and we tell people, oh, don't cry. The first thing everywhere at a funeral you see is a box of tissue, because the tissue tells people, okay, turn off the tears, not so that you could be comfortable, but that I could be comfortable. Right. But we have to normalize the fact that if I'm in pain, I cry. Right. And I don't do that alone. I have to release myself from the public shame of thinking that crying is weakness. And that's especially with us men. Right. Yes. The reason what we don't cry out, we act out. That's why we act the way we do sometimes. Right. OK. Y'all too. No, don't look at me like that. So it's important to, I don't even know what. Yeah. So it's important to allow the tears to flow when you're triggered by something, when, because the body is going to respond. If you don't let the body go through the process of its initial response, it's going to have another response. Your temperature is going to rise. And so you're going to get angry. You're going to get sweaty. And so you're going to get anxious. You're going to, your mind is going to start racing. So you're going to think you're depressed, when really what you need to do is when you feel the pain, you need to cry out the pain or be honest with the pain, because then your body is going to choose other outlets. That's it.
That's really good, because see, they tell us we got to be strong Black women, so I will freeze to cry sometimes, but I felt the anxiety. I feel the anxiety of it, like like you said, the temperature rising up, and before you know it, you ready to punch somebody in the throat, and that ain't even done nothing to you. So, but it's hard. It's hard to cry in front of crying.
So you anxious and on medication because you want to be strong and not cry. I'm
not on medication, but yeah.
I mean,
not anymore. So
you know what I mean?
Yes.
And if you are, that's your business.
Absolutely.
So here, I have another question. So for the viewers, I'll put this as simplistically as possible. At what point do you say to an individual, listen, enough is enough, right? And you have to begin to, at some point, develop the mentality to move forward.
Are you going to say it to him like that, though? Enough is enough. No. Like, what?
Get over it.
What?
Your cat died. Get over it.
You know, it takes vulnerability to say I'm not doing okay.
Right.
And I can't be vulnerable with people that I don't think can handle my vulnerability. And so it's about creating safe spaces for people to say, yo, you know what? I'm messed up. I ain't got it all together. You know, and so that other people can speak their truth so that they don't have to go around. I don't know if y'all say this in your church. I'm blessed and highly favored when you know you ain't got nothing but hell in your house. Right? You lying. Right? How much freeing would it be with saying, yo, man, these kids are crazy. My husband get on my nerves. Whatever it is, if we are honest as opposed to, trying to fake and hide, we have to create spaces where people can be vulnerable. And then we promote that vulnerability. Otherwise, people just continue to suffer in silence, and suffering in silence doesn't help anybody. Anything that you keep secret grows, gets worse. When you expose stuff to the light, that's when the light can sort of, correct, and the light can sort of help people grow. But if we don't have the vulnerability, and that's a problem in our Black community. That's why we're so traumatized sometimes, is we keep so many secrets. Everything got to be a secret. We don't want nobody to know our business because we're afraid somebody going to take that bit. Even those of us who got money, we don't want people to know we got money because we're afraid somebody going to come to us and ask us to hold something. Right. So we keep everything in our community a secret. But the problem is for people who have to heal in community, we have to learn to create safe spaces in community because we heal in communally. I don't know if that answered your question. Maybe not.
It was good.
No, it's good.
Wow. That's crazy. Anyone like to share before we move on to the next question? God, oh, man. Okay. Bree, you have anything to say, Bree? Anything?
I mean, I can talk about grief, I guess. I feel like everyone's talked about a person they've lost in their lives. I'll go a different route of grief. I felt grief when I moved because my family were besties, and I went to college locally, so I stayed with them for all of undergrad, and then my PhD came up, and it's not like I went 8 years away. I was down in Baltimore, but it was still weird to be on my own and waking up in the morning and there not being someone downstairs maybe hey, or even when I got tired of being by myself, just being able to open my door, make a little left, open my sister's door and be and then closing it back and then going back to my room. And so for a while, I guess I grieved those interactions, those relationships I used to be able to have with my family. I've adjusted, of course. I like being in my house alone, and that's fine now. But in the beginning was hard, and I always know that it's like a reset sort of thing. When I come back and visit, now I know that when I leave, when I go get in my car, I start packing things away. My mom gonna be at the front door, and I'm gonna be behind my wheel, not paying any attention to her, because I'm gonna be Siri, put in address to my apartment before I get started back on the road, because I know I'm going to be going 2 hours
back to my apartment. Yeah, I'm going to be going right back to my apartment where they're not at. So that would be my experience with grief that I am sharing with you all today. That was good, Bree.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, that was awesome. I tell you, this is good. So next question, Dr. Foe. So how can we recognize whether or not we're experiencing grief or mental health issues like depression?
Okay, so as far as grief is concerned, we sort of like to break up the reactions or responses to grief. And of course, if you have lost something, or if you've experienced a significant change in any pattern of behavior, you may have some amount of grief that you're just not dealing with. Now, it doesn't all rise to a mental health condition or mental health concern, right? It all depends on its impact on our ability to do what we call the 4 L's: live, laugh, love, learn. So if I have an impairment, or if I have a problem that impairs my ability to live daily life functions, to cognitively process stuff, our learning sphere, to laugh. What is my affect when people, am I able to experience joy? Am I able to float between joy and sadness, and then be able to move myself between the two? And then the last one, of course, live, laugh, love, learn. What am I loving? How does it interfere with my interpersonal relationships, right? And so we break grief specifically up into 4 categories: our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual reactions to whatever losses we have. And things like numbness, or sadness, or depression, or tears, or sobbing, anger, guilt. There's things like sleeping problems, discomfort. One of the things that people who are experiencing grief, initially, they experience great periods of confusion. That's why when you grieve, you ain't even productive at work. You don't remember sometimes why you got up that morning or what you were doing that morning. There's a lack of hope, a feeling of powerlessness. The fact of the matter is, grief looks so much like so many other disorders that oftentimes you may need to get someone to help you get to the root of the problem before you say, "Oh, I'm depressed," or I have anxiety. Because depression is rooted in the mind, anxiety is rooted in the mind, grief is rooted in the heart. So if I am suffering with grief and not depression, and someone is helping me try to heal my head, that's doing nothing for my heart. Because we can't think our way to feeling better about the pains we experience in our heart, right? So it's a little bit different. And so, I know with my clients, I always make sure that we've processed it enough to know, okay, well, are you grieving if there's a traumatic event that took place that now you having these somatic or these physiological or psychological responses to things? Well, let's find out what the trigger was. And if the trigger goes back to some significant loss, then we allow them to go through the grieving process to see if the grief that they've put aside has now caused them to be depressed, caused them to be anxious. Because the truth of the matter is, one of the biggest things with depression is it stops our ability to get up, to do things, to want to engage in relationships. Well, if I lost someone that's important to me, I don't want to talk to nobody. I don't want to go nowhere. I want to sit in the bed and cry. So someone may think, "Oh, you're depressed." No, I'm not depressed. I'm grieving. Like, what response should I have? Should I go out acting like life is all cool and copacetic? No, I'm in pain. Right. So we also got to be careful sometimes with those labels as it relates to grief, because you can't heal the heart with the head.
You can't heal the heart with the head. Wow,
that's a word.
Right.
One of y'all gonna use that. Reverend Watson, Reverend Gill, one of y'all gonna use that.
I can pass the offering plate real quick if you need.
They mentally wrote it down.
They're gonna use. Yeah, one of y'all gonna use that.
Yeah, that's good. So moving right along. So Dr. Fo, how can grief impact your life? Like, how can it impact your life? How can it really? How can it impact your life? How can it impact your life?
Well, it changes us physically. Getting headaches, achy muscles, nausea. It affects your immune system. It's been known to cause heart problems, increased blood pressure. I mean, why not? Right? We see the emotional toll. It's sadness, anger, despair, guilt, loneliness. Right? It affects us mentally, cognitively. It creates forgetfulness, a lack of concentration, confusion. It even affects us spiritually. Some of us, it affects us to the point where we start to, for our whole lives, we were with God and God was everything to us. And then God put us to the test and took something from us. And all of a sudden, now God is to blame. It affects some of us spiritually. It affects us socially. Some people may avoid you because they don't know what to say or how to help you. Because let me set somebody free right here. Let me just stop right here.
Come on, somebody.
You are not supposed to, you don't have to say anything to someone who's grieving. Just be there. Just provide the space. Just provide a listening ear.
Amen.
If you don't know what to say, you know what? I don't know what to say, but I'm here to be with you. Right? There's there's nothing you can say. I hate it when people say, well, let me know if there's anything that I can do. Well, right now, I need you to raise the dead, because that's the only thing that will change my disposition at this current moment. Right. So what you say, is there anything I could do in support of you? It's a better question than what can I do? Because you could raise the dead, you know. So making sure that you understand that people, even if you're grieving, let people off the hook that said the wrong things out their mouth to you. At least they're not suffering no more. They up in glory, looking down on you right now. Well, what does that have to do with me right now? Right? They in glory and I'm down here suffering in pain. That don't even make no sense. I don't care if they're in glory. I'm suffering right now. Right? Okay. They're not, so all those things, let people off the hook for people who didn't know what to say, that tried to help you soothe your pain. They did the best that they could. Let them off the hook. People say dumb stuff when they don't know how to deal with their own emotional responses, because your grief and your pain may be triggering their grief and their pain. And someone said that stupidness to them, so they're going to just say the same stupidness.
Oh, God. I really do hate when people, they may be in a better place, but I ain't. Yeah. And you said, I'm down here. I'm terrible. Like, life is horrible right now. Mm-hmm. So, I hate when people say that.
No,
I don't say nothing. I don't say anything. Yeah,
that's good, because often we as believers, we as saints, we don't know what to say to people. Right. When people need the ministry of our presence instead of the ministry of our words, we want to throw scriptures at them. We want to tell them, I know what you're going through. When in reality, we don't. And so just be there. Just be present. And just offer little things that you can help them with. Just practical, physical things. Yeah. Small things. Because that's generally what they need, instead of you trying to come up with every scripture verse in the Bible in reference to death and grief.
Yeah, but Reverend Watson, what happened when Jesus died on the cross, man? The earth shook, the heavens opened, the veil in the temple tore in half, and then heaven went silent.
That's right.
For the space of 30 minutes. Well, what in the world? Whenever has God gone silent? He ain't had nothing to say. His son was dead.
You're right.
He was in pain.
And he was in pain.
And he knew Jesus was coming back. He wasn't coming back the same, but he was coming back.
Right.
And heaven was silent. Yo, let's just be quiet and just give people our presence.
Or and something else you could possibly, if you really want to help, you could probably do something like, hey, I'm gonna come bring over some dinner or some lunch. Make sure you ate today. Or I'm gonna come straighten up the house a little bit because I know you ain't felt like it. Let me run a vacuum, something like that.
But not during casserole time, right? When someone initially loses their loved one, everybody bring over a plate. Right. After the funeral is over,
you will see no plate.
2 weeks later, the house is gone. The house is quiet. Now is when people need the support, because now it starts to hit them. Yo, I'm here by myself. Right. Now everybody is gone. Casserole time is gone. Nah, get people a month later. That's people, right. Remember the dates that people, if you care about someone, remember the date that someone lost their loved one on their birthday, and just write it, put it in your calendar, and just give them a call. When you know someone who just spending their first Mother's Day without their mother, or Father's Day without their fathers, give them a call, or just let them know, yo, I'm thinking about you, because it's gut wrenching to wake up on Mother's Day and have no card to give to nobody.
Right.
When all your life you've been giving out Mother's Day cards. That's tough for people. And so even as we celebrate Mother's Day and we celebrate holidays, we got to remember those people that got empty chairs at their table. That's when they need us. They don't need us around funeral time. They don't even remember anything that's happening anyway. They're in such shock. They need us.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah. And that's one thing that's great you said it, because that's one thing I very rarely do. When someone passes away, I very rarely reach out to them at that exact moment, or within those 2 or 3 days after. I always wait till after to reach out to them, and just let them know I'm thinking about you, praying for you, whatnot. Because, like you say, it's so much, and I do that because I know how I will feel. I know how I felt, when I lost, significant people in my life, and I didn't want to talk to nobody. I didn't want you to tell me nothing. No. I didn't want to hear nothing. I didn't want to hear nothing from me because there's nothing you can say to me.
Period.
And I know you don't mean no harm. Some people don't mean no harm, but then some people just be too deep and just do too much, and you just want to pop them for real. You just want you just pop them.
It's true.
It's like, what you doing? Like, what you doing?
Or like those people that ask you, like, "Are you all right?"
Right.
What?
Actually, I'm all wrong.
No, I'm not okay. Like, that's the dumb. Like, they said there are no dumb questions. That's a dumb question. Yeah. Your loved one is dead. You're not okay. Like,
we'll understand it better by and by.
Huh? Will we?
Will we though? Will we really?
Like, come on, man. Like, okay. It's enough of that.
Yeah, we getting upset with people now.
Yeah, but I would say, I'll say that I literally watched my stepmother, God rest her soul. I watched her grieve my father until she passed away. Like, I literally watched her, we would go to the house, and me and my sister would visit her, and we were driving there. We were 16. We would go to the house and visit her, and it was like she wanted us to stay. She didn't want us to leave because now she's in a house. She ain't had nobody to argue with, nobody to fuss with, nobody to cut up with, like her and my dad did. And so she was lonely. And then it was like one day she was gone. It was just like, what happened? And I really believe that grief played a major part in that, made a major part in that. Anybody else have any other questions or anything you want to say? No? Okay. All right. Here recently, we've experienced a lot of gun violence. A lot of gun violence just recently here in Buffalo, New York. A gunman walked into the grocery store and killed innocent people. And just a few days ago, we experienced the shooting in Texas, elementary school. Today we had a shooting in Texas. Somebody walked into an elementary school and, killed innocent children. So how do we deal with that traumatic loss, even though we were not directly affected by it? How do we, deal with that? Because I believe that those, especially those towns, they're really grieving. Even though you might not have been directly affected by it, but it's just the thought of it. Mm-hmm. So we weren't directly connected to it, but we feel a sense of what, we feel like we are connected to it. How do someone deal with that type of grief?
And I was hoping to run out the clock and avoid this discussion. When we talk about our psychological traumas and the things that we see that we can't unsee, the stories we hear that we can't unhear, they trigger us, and we call it trauma because the amount of overwhelming stress and sadness we get exceeds our ability to cope or integrate the emotions that are involved with that experience into a positive way, right? As a community of Black people, we've experienced historical trauma, which is that intergenerational trauma experienced by a specific cultural group that has a history of being systematically oppressed. That cumulative psychological and emotional wounding across generations. And so even if it doesn't directly affect us. The shootings aren't in our communities. They're not in our schools. They're not in our grocery store. Our bodies and our DNA remembers the psychological and physical trauma that we as a people have undergone, and it's woven into the fabric even of who we are. And the problem with our unresolved traumas, or even our disenfranchised historical traumas, is that it causes us to develop stories. The problem is when we develop an internal story, all we see is the story, and we've developed so for our kids, we've developed a story that's told to them that they have to be 10 times more diligent at traffic stops. And now what are we going to tell them? You got to be even more diligent when you walk into a grocery store or when you go to school. Even for us, we're told that we have to, in order to climb the corporate ladder, especially not only if you're Black, but if you're a Black woman, you have to be beyond exceptional. Those are the stories that our intergenerational and historical traumas have taught us. We all have stories. We see it in our education system. We see it in the healthcare system, right? And so we've developed these stories, and we've handed down this miasma of sort of despair and caution that shouldn't really exist. But without the passing down of different rules, we probably wouldn't have children that are safe, right? And so we not only carry our stories, but in our minds and our psyches, we're more hypervigilant. We have distress relating to our trauma that causes people to think about or relive an event continually, having flashbacks or nightmares every time that you see lights behind you as you're stopped as a Black person in this country. There's something in your body that automatically responds, and hopefully your body chooses the freeze mechanism instead of the fight mechanism. Otherwise, if your body chooses that fight mechanism, which some of us don't have control over, we may not make it through that traffic stop, if we're to be honest, right? We have the habit of avoiding things that remind us or remind someone of the trauma. We have an increased sensitivity and reactivity. So a person may startle easily or become hypervigilant to their surroundings. One of the things that I deal with my clients, just talking about trauma and this Buffalo thing, and then again today in Texas, is the only way that we heal from this trauma is we have to discover our own language to describe what it is that we're going through. Because if we don't want to see the pain or feel the pain or enter the pain, we really want to actually turn it off. And so we have to find the words and sort of reject the labels that other people have used or introduced into our own lexicon or our psyche for us to describe how we feel. So we have to use our own words instead of other people's words. And so there's a unique language that we have to come up with to describe sort of how we're feeling, even when it doesn't necessarily walk down our street or sit in our rooms or in our homes. The truth of the matter is, we need that as a culture. We need that linguistic acculturation to help us find language to describe so that we don't act out what we can't emotionally get out. And I said it before, so we can tell people that we're angry, but my repressed feelings then make me act in anger. So if you piss me off enough, I will fight you. So you'll think I'm aggressive when really I'm just traumatized by something. So if I don't get it out, it comes out in the form of abandonment. So at the first sign of trouble, I get up and I walk out. I walk out of relationships instead of staying in them, right? It comes out in apathy. So if I can't deal with the pain, the easiest way to not deal with pain is to act like I don't care about pain. And so I become apathetic to things, and I could go on and on about this. And so the key is, if we're going to work through our intergenerational, our disenfranchised trauma, the things that we turn on every day, and it looks so familiar. It looks like it happens every single day. If we're going to deal with that, we're going to have to be honest and talk about how it makes us feel and allow ourselves to be angry and to figure out, how is it that I really feel? How do we say that we're scared without letting people know that, we're not going to just sit down and take it. How do I let someone know that I am angry without being aggressive? All these things are important. And so I don't really know how it is that things change, how the wound gets healed because the scab keeps getting picked off day by day by day. But it has to start with the emotional honesty and finding the emotional language to express how you feel. And it's got to be beyond anger, because anger is not emotion. It's a chosen response to an emotion. So it's got to be more than that. I have to dig deep to find the words to sort of describe how it is that I feel. That beyond that, man, I don't know, man. Go get something to drink. Oh, did I say that out loud? Jesus.
Hey.
Oh, my Lord. Oh,
I'm here for that.
It's time for me to go. All right. No. So when things get difficult, man, I go to humor because that's my coping strategy. So yeah, it took too much out of me to give you all that.
There's a lot of truth in a joke, though.
That's not. This is coffee in this cup. Just to
Listen.
Oh, man. No, that's good, man. Emotional honesty, emotional honesty is good. It's just, I think hard. Sometimes it's just find those people that you can be, vulnerable with and be emotional honest, that not have that bury there and just be honest with them about how you feeling. And they're not going to, come back at you because you feel a certain way about, different things, not just the traumas happen in, or the things just happened, the shooting just happened, but just in all aspects of your life, when you have somebody to talk to. That's good.
And what you all are doing, this space here is a good space. It is a good space just by the fact that you all are doing this. You're creating the environment for people to say, you know what, I'm not okay. I don't got to fake it. And we should stop rewarding, especially in religious circles, people who we know faking it. And we know your life.
Thank you.
Just
say that
tell
again for
everybody
people
your
in the
life
back.
messed up, and we just move on together, man. God don't call perfect people; He called the broken. So just go on and tell everybody you broken, and just let's go on and get on over it.
Say that again for the people in the back.
That's all.
They will tell you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last question for the night. Well, not last question, second to last question, then we get out of here. How should a person live with grief? If they're grieving, they know they're grieving, how do you live with it? And just do your day-to-day activities and stuff like that. How do you really live with it?
So the first thing, right, is this. Know that you're not alone. Know that nothing is wrong with you. Grief is the normal, natural reaction to loss, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing is wrong, right? So we look at sort of helping ourselves. We look at self-care in terms of grief, in what we can do physically, developing a routine. Developing a healthy eating schedule, exercising, right? The pain that we feel, we don't need to develop coping strategies to help us when we need them, when life's exigencies come to find us. But we need coping strategies that we use every single day, so that when something happens, our body has muscle memory, so we access these things even when we don't feel like doing it, right? That's what we teach people with depression. So physically, having a routine, cognitively, being intentional about giving yourself a break, controlling your negative thoughts, speaking truth to your grief. Listen, you're not abnormal. I don't got to put it away. I don't got to grieve alone. I could tell people, I still miss my mother. And people aren't going to look at you like you're crazy because they missing somebody too. And it's perfectly okay. But there's a release that comes, or a catharsis that comes, and you being open and honest about how you feel, right? The next is, emotional, engage in self-soothing things, things that it will engage your five senses. I talked about it. Be emotionally honest with not only yourself, but also with others. Take some vulnerability by telling someone, you know what, I'm not okay today. I'm remembering whomever it is that I've lost. I miss my family, whatever it is. Just be honest. You'll realize that people will not look at you like you're soft or you're a punk because you're honest with them emotionally. Right? Okay. They look at you like you crazy when you say you're all right, but you acting like everything is not all right. No, listen, people know the truth about you from your behavior. It don't matter what you say. So you might as well let what you say match your behavior. And hopefully if you tell the truth, then maybe you ain't got to act it out because you're talking it out. I don't know, whatever. And then socially, remember I talked about the fact that we as a community, we grieve and we help one another and we heal in community. So find a grief group. Don't be intentional about not withdrawing from your friends. Yes, your friend said the wrong thing. Yes, they made you upset. They didn't know what they didn't know what to say, just like you don't know what to say, right? Okay, so engage with your friends, and then fight the urge to grieve alone. This is not something that you do by yourself. You do this in community. You do this with other people, and they may not understand uniquely what you are going through, and they don't have to understand because no one will understand, because we don't grieve people, we grieve relationships. We don't grieve things, we grieve relationships.
That sounds good. That sounds, man. It's you dropped a lot of heavy stuff about Defoe, and man, we appreciate you tonight. Before we go, we like to end our Real Talk Tuesday with what we call a quick fire question. And
if you want to take that risk, go on.
You're going last.
We're talking about grief tonight and being hurt and things like that. But just to kind of lift the mood a little bit, the quick fire question is: what is the dumbest way you've been hurt? What is the dumbest way you've been hurt? Like you look back and you laugh at, like, I was like hurt over that. Like, what's the dumbest way what's the dumbest way you've been hurt?
That's for me.
Everybody. We all have to answer.
Everybody can answer.
The dumbest way I've been hurt. The
dumbest way you've been hurt.
I'm not going to say it's the dumbest way.
Uh-huh.
The most way that I was not anticipating was recently I was in a car accident, and it was a head-on collision, and the man was elderly and he was going the wrong way on the bypass. So it wasn't the dumbest thing, but it was something that I could have never and I deal with a whole bunch of crazy situations very often, but I could have never imagined seeing somebody coming up the wrong way on the bypass. And I still think about it every day. Like, I just don't know how it happened. So this is a dumb stuff, but was it the most unexpected? Absolutely. That would have been hurt.
So as far as hurt, you're talking physical and emotional?
Either one.
Okay.
However way you receive the question. In whatever way.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a physical. The dumbest way I've been hurt is I was on my way to Reverend Watson's wedding. So I was running late because we had did gift wrapping that day. It was a busy day that day. I'm a part of a lot of ministries in the church. Y'all know that. I was running late. I had to go get my cousin. So I'm running back to the church. I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna lock me out the church. I fall, tear up my pantyhose, fall out of my Jessica Simpsons, and I ended up spraining my ankle. Unbeknownst to me, it wasn't until I put my shoes back on, I go on the wedding, I'm cute, I got, my hair weave is popping, everything. I go to the reception, dance, and then by Monday, I'm like, wow, my ankle is really, really jacked up. I sprained my ankle running to everyone's wedding. Falling out of my Jessica Simpson. So yeah,
I remember that.
But that was the dumbest thing that had ever happened. Scarlett definitely took a tumble that day, but you know what? She got back up and she was still cute.
It did.
And I was still on time.
It was.
Okay. I'll say I'll give it dumbest, and we'll take it back to like, younger Brianna, little Brianna, who it doesn't take much to hurt a little child, you know what I mean? So dumbest way that I have ever been hurt, felt personally attacked, was one of my parents telling me we can't go out to eat. Because now what? Now I got to stomp to my room. I got to go throw my head in the pillow because why don't you love me? All we have in the house is spaghetti, and I don't want it. I don't want that. How dare you say that we cannot go out to go get my favorite food today? And little Brianna, that would hurt her feelings the absolute most. Ready to go throw a tantrum in the bedroom, talk to my dolls like,
But listen,
play up a little storyline with them. And I'd make it so that, of course, my dolls, their parents would take them out to eat and would hope in my little head, I hope they hear how my dolls treat their children because this is how you should parent. This is
you went all the way out.
So basically, your dolls had better parents than you at the time, because they got to go to McDonald's and you did not.
They got to go to McDonald's and get dessert.
Next.
I can't. I guess I have to say something, right?
Yes.
I mean, you ain't never been hurt in all them years. How old are you? 80?
I should say just now. I don't really. I mean, I don't tend to let
physically or emotionally.
Okay. When I don't want. I hate to go all the way back to my childhood, but I
Let's do it.
For time.
Oh,
I used to get teased. I mean, I would say first, second, third, maybe fourth, around fifth, I began to grow out of it. People teased me relentlessly about the size of my ears and how they stuck out. So you can't really notice it now because my head has gotten bigger. But as I was going through school, my head was smaller and my ears had a tendency to stick out.
Oh.
So yeah, I used to get teased looking back. Looking back on it now, it's like, whatever. But while we were going through it,
that was hurtful.
Yeah.
Kids are horrible.
Baby Kitty got teased.
Yeah.
They hurt that baby feelings.
Thankfully, the scars are gone. But
you grew into them.
You walked into your season.
I walked into my ears.
Before you want to give us one?
Yeah, man, I got one too. I lit my desk on fire in second grade, and my mom decided, "Don't worry, no one cares." I lit my desk on fire in second grade, and my mom, who taught up the street at a school, she came and she whooped my behind in front of my second grade class, lighting the desk on fire. And that was the dumbest thing I ever did. That got myself.
How'd you matches?
I had a lighter, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had problems. I still do, but
we all do.
Emotional
we all work in
honesty.
progress.
We've created the space
I
for
lit something on fire in my house
honesty.
the other day.
Little pyromaniac. We love that for you.
I'm not a pyromaniac. I just choose violence through fire. Ain't no big deal.
You like Kevin Hart? Get fire on him.
Don't ask me to build no fire out back neither. That's gonna be the biggest bonfire you done ever seen.
I can't bonfire with you.
Mm-mm.
Oh my God!
Reverend Gail, did you give one?
No, I'm about to give one. Like the one thing I thought about was when I was younger, me and my stepdad, we used to wrestle a lot, and we was wrestling, and he rolled over, and my finger went like all the way back. He fractured my finger. And that's the one thing I think of the dumbest way I got hurt. Like he rolled over my finger. We were wrestling. We used to wrestle all the time. And he rolled over and fractured my finger. Took me to the hospital. He was scared to death. Yeah. Oh, and another one was with our kids. We used to have a living room table, right? And I'm done. We used to have a living room. What's it called? The coffee table. That's what's called, the coffee table. And I used to sit at the table, and I used to rock in my chair.
Mm-hmm.
Oh Lord.
Well, one day I rocked and went all the way back and busted my head on the coffee table. And I don't know if you know them old coffee tables.
Them old ones, they were made.
And so my stepdad teaches me to this day. He said the knot grew on my head like the Bugs Bunny. You know, they hit the head and the knot just goes. He said the knot on your head just rose up like.
But you didn't lean back no more.
Yeah, he said you didn't do it from that day on. You stop. Even today, if I see a child do it, I panic. I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that.
The repressed memory of it all.
Yeah, it was the memory. All right, let's wrap this up tonight. All right, thank you. I'm sorry.
Dr. Defoe, before we jump off, can you give us your information, how we can get in contact with you if someone is in need of your services as far as grief counseling? Because that's what you do. We normally we always, like to give our guests a chance to shout themselves out so that we can,
Yeah. So I got a practice here in Laurel. If you all need some telehealth help, somebody else in the practice could help you. You could just reach out to, the website is Imara Counseling, IMARA counseling.com. Or you can send an email to info@imaracounseling.com if you need help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Are we all good? Everything's said and done. All right. Well, let's give Dr. for a hand clap.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we thank you tonight. You dropped a lot of knowledge on us, and we definitely appreciate you, man. So we just until next time, we'll holla.
Bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye, y'all.